Welcome to our February 22nd Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. We want to welcome all of those who are here with us at the old courthouse and those of you who are joining us on Zoom. To get started, here's some information about public comment. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Additionally, near the start of our meeting, we'll invite folks to provide general public comment to the commission, which is time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to general county business. Public comment will not be recorded and shared on our county's YouTube site to ensure compliance with YouTube's content policies. To hear public comment, individuals can join us live on Zoom or here in the courthouse. We will first call on people who are here in person, and then we will turn to online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you are on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed at the county commission. We also reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that the comments received by the commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference also. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. Tonight's agenda has 5 items on our consent agenda. Then we'll move to general public comment. We have just 2 items on our regular agenda. One is the tow operators agreement. The next is an executive session for the county commission. Then we'll do appointments and commissioner administrator miscellaneous. Commissioners, do either of you have an item on the consent agenda you'd like to have removed for further discussion?
None from me.
Before I ask for a motion, I don't want to pull it off, but I do want to. I see Pam Wygant here, and I think it's commendable to our staff for following those fiscal reporting procedures. That is a very important role for administration. And because we followed those fiscal reporting procedures, we got quite a large chunk of money, which we were able. So Pam, I want to thank you and your staff for following those rules and getting money for the county. So thank you very much. So with that, commissioners, I'd take a motion on the consent agenda. Would anybody in the public like to pull an item from the consent agenda? Anyone online, Sarah? Thank you, Commissioner Willie. Now I'll take a motion.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve tonight's consent agenda items 1.1 through 1.5.
Moved in second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. We'll move on to general public comment. Do we have anyone here at the courthouse who would like to provide general public comment? Don't forget to state your name and address for our minutes. And the first item is 3.1, the 2023 tow operators agreement. Dana?
Your battery there. Commissioners, we'd like to welcome to the podium our management analyst, Zaina Fada, to introduce this item. Zaina?
Good
Hello.
evening, commissioners. Commissioners, we have a cover memo for tow operators agreement. The members of the tow operators agreement have met on February 7th at 10 a.m. here in the commission's chamber to discuss their interest in wanting to increase the fees for the tow operations to cover some of the costs and some of the losses. During our meeting, tow operators have elected a representative to represent them today as their voice because not all of them are able to be present. We have Ryan from Hillcrest here if you have any questions. And the request for increase has been attached to the cover memo for you all to review.
Thank you. Any questions for Zaina? Not yet. We may have some. And you said Ryan is here from Hillcrest. Ryan, do you want to wish to come up and come visit with the commission?
So the two
Ryan,
pages.
pull that mic up just a
Oh.
little taller. Get nice and close to it. Thank you.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So my name's Ryan with Hillcrest Wrecker. The two pages that I think you guys have attached there, one of them is actually from the US Department of Labor. It's from their Bureau of Statistics. I looked up the buying power of a dollar in February of 2016, which is the last time that the tow operators agreement was changed, the pricing agreement was changed. When you compare that to December of 2022, they're stating that there's been about a 25% decrease, or there should be a 25% increase. And so the second page that I have there is all the prices and what the rates are right now. And then right next to it is the 25% increase. It's what that number looks like when you apply the multiplier from the US Bureau of Labor. The number, or the column that's right next to that, actually shows what I'm just suggesting we put the rates to. I don't think that it's probably reasonable to charge, $219.05 for a tow. It'd be easier to charge $220. I totally agree with the 25% increase because we've seen a drastic increase in our expenses, especially in the past 2 to 3 years. Everybody's been to the grocery store. Everybody knows how much more expensive things are. And these expenses have translated directly to all of our expenses. So it's everything from tires have gone up, labor has gone up, parts have gone up, fuel has gone up. Even the price of a new truck has gone up a little over 30% for just a new flatbed tow truck. So the cost of replacing our equipment has also gone up drastically. The biggest challenge has actually been finding help. It's finding workers. That's been a huge problem for us. And so our expense to employ people has gone up significantly. So I think that the 25% is a really reasonable increase. And so that's what we're asking for. So do you guys have any questions for me?
Not yet,
Not yet. Okay.
but we may.
Okay.
Yes. Question? No. Okay. Thank you. We'll discuss and we may have some questions for you. Okay, commissioners, questions for Zena or Ryan or staff?
Commissioners, this is the first year I'm transitioning these annual agreements to Zena, and then being a point of contact, a liaison throughout the year should issues arise. This just to make sure that I'm giving the appropriate amount of background. We do these agreements every single year. And staff stays neutral on the position of recommending an increase or not. We facilitate conversations and we make space. Zena held the meeting and outlined what they've requested. And I'm grateful that Ryan showed up, and I'm glad that the operators have designated Ryan to be a representative, but staff does try to stay neutral on this and leave it up to the commission to just determine whether or not fees should be increased or not. That being said, if you want to approve things as is, keep them as is, you can do that this evening. You can approve what's being proposed. We just have to, you can do that tonight, if everything as proposed, or we can come back. You can give us a little more direction. We can come back with a revised proposal and contract for you to approve next week or the week after, depending on what's needed.
So I have a question. In our memo, it says at this time, the staff is not recommending a modification. You're saying it shouldn't say that. It just should say, this is the information.
Sorry. We should, yeah, I should have spelled that out a little better. We're neutral. Yeah,
Okay.
noted.
you.
Sorry about that.
Fine. Glad we have opportunities for questions.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a question and I'm not sure who would like to answer it. You can pitch it to Zena and you can pitch it to somebody else if you'd like. Can you walk us through the process of, why the county engages the tow operators, how people get called, how the list works, and just talk that through, and then the price is then paid by customer. So what's our role here?
Well, the tow operators list work on a non-preferential tow. If somebody was to be getting an accident and emergency management was to show up and they asked the individual, do you have a preferred tow operator or do you have a non-preferential tow? And they agreed that they do not have a preferential tow, then the emergency management goes through a list that they have and they will call someone well, they have a list, but they usually go by who answers the call first. So if they were to call Hillcrest or if they were to call Heartland Tow, the individual would show up, pick up, show up. And it is also up to the tow operators on how they want to accept the fee. It can either be in cash or it can be in card.
Well, our role is because it comes through dispatch. So if somebody doesn't have a preferred company, then, instead of us, we can't really like recommend one over another, but do tow operators ask to be put on the list? Do some of them choose not to be on our list? Or is this like everybody that responds in Douglas County?
So it's based on the agreement. If they decide to agree with what is on the agreement and sign it and send it back to us, then they are automatically included on the list. But if they decide not to be a part of the agreement and sign it and send it back to us, then they will not be on the list.
Is there a difference
Yeah.
in the price that we would be negotiating or setting from the county versus if somebody says, yes, I have a tow operator, I want to call, the price that they would be charged through that company? Is it different? I assume we can't set prices for everybody outside of who dispatch calls.
I don't have the information for
We
that.
cannot. No, this is just for tows that are dispatched by 911, our 911 center for non-preferential requests.
How close are those numbers usually between, does anybody look at like what is a private tow cost if you call them directly versus the cost that if it gets dispatched?
I haven't looked at that.
Okay,
Um,
I'm just curious how close they are in these two recommendations and how close they've been in the past. I'm not saying that we have to be market rate for everything if we're also giving people like this is a way to get more business through 911, but I'm just curious about how far off they tend to be.
Ryan, do you want to speak to that? Would you be willing to answer that question?
Ryan, what is your last name?
I'm gonna have you repeat that on the microphone so Robin can get it for the minute.
Sure. My last name is Clam. It's Klamm. So there is a significant difference between the price of a private tow versus the price of an accident tow. For example, our pricing on everything for a private tow, if someone called in during business hours would be $85. And then after hours, it would be $110. And that's for something that's in Lawrence, staying in Lawrence. It could go up if there was winching involved. If the vehicle's been involved in an accident, a lot of times there are fluid spills, things that need cleaned up. And so when you hear that number of $85, it sounds really drastic compared to what we're proposing. The reason that it costs so much more to do a police tow is whenever someone's broken down on the side of the road, or they are broken down in a parking lot or at their home and they need towed somewhere, a lot of times they're scheduling that tow. So they're calling us and saying, hey, can you get here? And we try to be there within about a half an hour. Sometimes it takes several hours to get there because we're busy. When there is a vehicle that's blocking the road and a police officer calls because it's been involved in an accident, we have to go like right now. And we don't know what we're going to be in for when we get there. Sometimes we respond and it's just a broken down vehicle. Other times we respond and the vehicle is flipped over upside down in the bottom of a ravine. And so we have to have the capabilities and the equipment to be able to recover that vehicle. Sometimes it can take hours to recover a vehicle depending on the situation. And so that's why it costs so much more for a police tow or a non-preference tow versus like just a regular, cash call or a regular private rate. The other thing is about 30% of the vehicles that we tow are actually left abandoned. So they get stuck at our yard and then the owner never picks them up and we can't do anything with them. A lot of these vehicles are older vehicles. They're wrecked. They have very little value other than salvage value. And there's actually a process, it's outlined in the tow operators agreement. And it basically outlines that it would like us to follow Kansas State Statute 8-1103 through 8-1106, I believe it is. And it defines the process for how we get rid of a vehicle whenever it's left abandoned at our yard. Well, that process requires us to look up with the state of Kansas on who owns the vehicle. And if the vehicle's not registered in Kansas, then we have to look up, alternate states. So it can cost anywhere from $20 to $50 to find out just who owns the vehicle. Then we have to send certified letters to the owner of the vehicle, any lien holders or banks or anything like that. The certified letters are almost $8 a piece. So we have to prepare those and mail those out. Then we have to wait until those come back. We post an ad in the newspaper saying that, hey, we're going to have an auction. These vehicles are going to be sold. And that ad costs several $100s. then it's still another $35 per vehicle to auction the vehicle. So we have all these expenses of disposing of a vehicle that's been left abandoned, on top of the fact that we had to pay our operators and pay the expense of towing the vehicle in the first place, and then storing it for several months and hosting an auction, cleaning the vehicle out. So a lot of these vehicles that are left abandoned, we're actually not making any money on them. We're losing money on a lot of these vehicles. So unfortunately, the price of the rest of those vehicles does need to be a little bit higher to accommodate for all the ones that never get picked up. But the majority of the reason that it costs so much more is just because of the nature of the response. The fact that it's an emergency. If someone calls for a private tow and we're on their way to go get them, and then the police call and say, hey, I need you here, right now. The person with that private tow, a lot of times is going to have to sit and wait until we can get there from the police tow. And so it's really, really expensive being able to respond to these accidents quickly and efficiently like we do.
Appreciate that clarification. So
Sure.
I came from a wrong perspective and you changed that for me. So thank you.
Well,
I have
appreciate
another
that.
question while you're there.
Sure.
Also in the memo, it says that there's been a request that 15 days be given to run the VIN verification. Or that it currently is 15 days and you're wanting that to be moved closer. Can you, I can just read it. In addition, tow operators requested that the 15 days given to run the VIN verifications be moved closer to the date of the tow. Can you talk about
So
that?
I think that might have been something that was requested by a different tow operator. I'm not entirely sure what he meant by that. In the tow operators agreement, it basically references the state statutes that I had mentioned before, and those state statutes give all of our time windows. So within 30 days, we have to find out who the person, whoever the vehicle owner is. And then we have a certain amount of time until we have to actually send out a certified letter to them. And the state outlines all of that for us. And so when the tow operators agreement references what the state, statute says, I think that the state statute's really reasonable. So I'm not entirely sure what he was asking for there.
Part maybe outside of our ability to change anyway. but
And
I'm-
if, I think the way that it works is if you guys wanted to tighten that down,
Mhm.
currently we have 30 days. If you guys were wanting to say, well, let's tighten this back down to 15 days that you have to send the stuff out. We could do that, but a lot of times it takes us a couple of weeks before we even find out, does this person have insurance? Are they wanting to come get the vehicle? We might not know for 15 days to even up to 3 weeks. And so that 30 days, in my opinion, is actually a pretty good window to find out who owns the vehicle.
And that's what legal counsel said as well when Zana consulted.
So Jill, this hasn't been changed since 2016. Is that correct? It's the same rate we charged in 2016?
The rates, we've made a couple changes around the requirements, but the rates, no, they haven't changed since 2016.
Brian, question, you brought up insurance and that triggered a curiosity in my head. How often is this covered under? I guess if you don't ever find the person and you're not getting any money, but if you do the person, is it usually covered under their auto insurance, or is this cost out of pocket for them?
It's a mixture.
Okay.
I would say that most of the time when the vehicles get picked up, that it is the insurance company that's coming to get the vehicle. A lot of times what we do, if someone comes in and they say, hey, look, I don't have insurance and I want to get my vehicle, we work with them. We give them, free days of storage, and it is not in our best interest to keep their vehicle. That's not what we want to do. Aside from being just the right thing to do, it's expensive, like I had mentioned, for us to try to auction off a vehicle. So if someone comes in and they don't have full coverage insurance, I mean, most of the time we work with them, to get them their vehicle back, because we don't want to keep it.
Be interested to hear from staff. The co-operators have aligned this to CPI. Is that a way, do you have any thoughts on, is that a good way to tie it moving forward, or?
It's hard for me to say because I inherited this agreement.
Yeah.
Similar to how Zana is, and even having a non-preferential tow operator agreement in the first place is something that is totally
Pretty unique.
discretionary on our
Mhm.
part. So I don't know what Sarah thinks.
Commissioners, I would say that if, this really came from a place of trying to set some standards, and create some order in the place and try to create some sort of price standards for this one piece of the tow operation that tow operators work in. If it was the commissioner's desire to increase it every year in accordance with CPI, we could do that. But generally, that's not how I do fees for building permits or fairgrounds or anything else we do, but there's no reason why we couldn't.
Have you changed any of those fees since 2016?
Definitely. Yeah, we've
okay.
definitely updated them since, but they're not necessarily marked to CPI.
To CPI, okay.
So who is paying these fees? So if a person is in a car accident, they say we don't have a preference, so it goes dispatched to 911 and you get called. If they have insurance, then it's covered through insurance. They may have to pay cash or credit card at that time to be towed. And then the issue is then if they're not there and nobody claims that vehicle, then the vehicle is, after your due diligence, is yours to sell, even though you're not making a lot off of it. So we're setting a price that citizens would pay for that service. So I just kind of making that clarification that it's not a question of coming out of county dollars, where we'd have more discretion, that it's a little more delicate because it's also coming out of taxpayers' pockets or citizens when they're in that situation.
Sorry. Correct. And at one point, in the first couple of years that I was playing the liaison role that Zane is playing, there were some complaints that were received from this office, from our about prices. And sometimes those were not by tow operators that were part of this process. There was some general confusion there, but I haven't received in the last year since we did this, I haven't received a single concern or contact about anything related to folks that are on our non-preferential tow list. So I consider that an indicator of folks when they are getting charged and going through this process, they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of.
I guess the other side of it, Jill, is do we have the same number of tow companies participating at this price as we have had in the past? Or are we losing some of those operators saying the price isn't worth it, I'm not going to be on the list anymore?
It's been the same ones.
Any other questions for staff or for Ryan?
One clarification, Ryan, the numbers that you brought us, I think are exactly the same as what Zana has put in our packet. So we have seen them, they're in a little different formats. I didn't immediately recognize it, but just wanted you to know that those numbers came to us and are part of the public packet.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have some discussion here. Thank you. Appreciate it. But before we do, we're going to have public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to provide public comment on this item? Thank you.
My name is Kelly Standiford. I live at 1105 Connecticut.
Kelly, pull that mic
Oh,
nice and close to you.
Kelly Standiford. I live at 1105 Connecticut, and I am a dispatcher for one of the companies here in town. I can assure you that the prices that we are speaking of today, based on inflation and based on all factors in the public sector, the population in Lawrence is very satisfied with our services. And they fully understand the charges that they are presented with because of the nature of the accident, whatever may have occurred. They expect this. I believe in my heart that what we are trying to attempt to do today serves the public in its best interest. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anyone online? Okay, now we'll have some discussion. So for one, I want to appreciate the tow operators coming in and working with us on that. And I do recognize that over the years, and when I first came on the commission, I heard the stories, things like accepting credit cards And that's a big deal. And because sometimes people don't have cash, and we heard stories of times when people were saying cash only and it's this much, and it felt like they were being gouged. So I really appreciate this process. I think one of the things I don't have and I'm interested to hear from commissioners, I don't have a great argument for not raising these prices. I mean, I think we've all, as Ryan said, felt inflation happening. I am a little concerned about the amount of the jump, and just want to have some conversation with commissioners. Yes, eggs have probably gone up that much, but not everything has gone up that much. And do we want to phase this, or I just want to get some commissioners feeling if they want to stick with this price or the recommendation, or is there a middle ground here? I'm just interested in that conversation.
So I definitely think the world has changed since 2016, price wise, on about everything that matters. I'd be curious to know how do we link that back to like fuel price for some, like for mileage, and labor price for some of those things, because I recognize that those are kind of two areas that have jumped considerably, or even jumped around considerably. And I don't know that we'll have that data to make a decision tonight. I do think that the discussion needs to center around how much those prices need to change, as opposed to whether or not they change. So I would also want to say that as much as I don't know about this process, I have seen it work, and it's one of those jobs that I'm glad I do not have. I think it requires a lot of creativity and thoughtfulness to some of the situations that they are correcting from.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I agree with your comments, Commissioner Kelly, that I don't have a good reason to disagree that the prices should go up. And I think that I really appreciate y'all being here. And Ryan, you gave some really good and thorough explanations of sort of the layer of costs. And so I think, in addition to the fuel and labor prices, the equipment prices that you mentioned, that those all really compound each other. And it was pretty enlightening to me to hear that you are often saddled with a lot of those vehicles, and then they become something that you have to spend money to get out of your possession in a legal fashion, and appreciate the how cumbersome that can be. So I'm certainly open to other amounts. I will acknowledge that my inclination personally is to appreciate that it's been, I guess, almost about 7 years now since this has changed, and that there are sort of significant compounding factors. So I feel comfortable with that. It's also just a little bit based off of personal anecdote of not in Douglas County, in a different community in Kansas, but going and aiding a friend who had to get a tow after an accident. And I believe that the claim that she submitted to her insurance was for a little bit over $200. So I think that number didn't surprise me, just having had that recent experience, even though it was outside of our community. So I'm personally comfortable with the $220 that has been suggested, but open to other commissioners' ideas about if there's somewhere a little more in the middle between where we're at and where that suggested amount is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading it as suppose suggested at 220 for the tow plus $5 per mile, or so we've got mileage, and then there's some additional other factors, the winching, extraordinary labor, waiting, drop fee, like those would be additional to that. So trying to kind of look through and say what would an actual cost be, and that's a bit of an unknown for me anyway.
Do I have any motions, commissioners? Just want to check in.
Before that, another thought is it does seem that it might serve us and staff to think about what kind of, if not the CPI inflation calculator, like what are some ways for us to assess, and how frequently are we assessing the numbers in these agreements to try and determine some sort of methodology, and I say that recognizing that a methodology is not going to apply to every agreement in the same way that they're different things have different factors. I know that that's something for us to solve tonight, certainly, but just want to encourage that maybe there's some sort of background thinking for us to do about how to approach this in the future and determining what a fair increase looks like.
I would say that, this is evaluated annually and we consult with the tow operators. So they're brought into that conversation. So
Mhm.
you have a chance to look at this every year.
I have another question for Ryan. Come on up and it's just sort of come up as I'm looking through this again and thinking a little bit about what one of my colleagues said about, we could look at the overall CPI inflation calculator, or we can look at some of these things individually. And I start to look at some of these things individually and just want a little more information. So when it says motorist assist, is that you didn't do a tow, you went out there and fixed the car in some way and got it going again?
Yeah, so a lot of times the police will call because they'll run across someone, especially maybe an elderly person who has got a flat tire and they're sitting on the side of the road and they might not have a cell phone. And so a police officer pulls up behind them and says, "Hey, do you need some help?" And they say, "Yeah, I need to get my tire changed on my car." And so then the police officer will call into dispatch and dispatch will call us to come out and we'll perform a service on the car. Sometimes it's a tire change. Sometimes it's because they ran out of fuel. Other times it's someone will have barely driven off the edge of the road a tiny little bit and their tires are just slipping and they can't quite get moving. And so we go over there and just give them a tiny little tug and they're back on the road and moving again. That happens sometimes. So it's for really, really basic services like that.
And how about waiting standby time?
So where waiting or standby time comes in, sometimes that there has been a crime committed. And so we'll show up on scene to tow the vehicle and they call us as soon as they find out that they need a tow truck. And then we arrive on scene, they still have to process the vehicle. Sometimes the vehicle is in the side of a building and the fire department hasn't cleared us to remove the vehicle yet. And so we can sit there. It's not something that happens on a really regular basis, but there are times when you'll sit and wait for hours to remove the vehicle from the situation. And like I said, that's not a really common thing to occur, but that wait time is in there so that if we show up on scene and have to, wait for a long period of time, that we can bill for that. And I believe that the contract states that you can only charge for wait time after you've waited for 30 minutes. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's what it says. So if you show up and have to wait a couple minutes to tow the car, you're not going to charge for that. But once it becomes excessive, then we do have to charge for that.
If personnel are responding, is it a single operator that responds with the vehicle for a tow, or is it more than one?
The majority of the time, it's a single operator. Yeah. There are extreme situations, once again, where we would have to send out multiple vehicles, multiple trucks, but the majority of the time it is just a single operator. And if I could make a comment, one thing that I know you had mentioned earlier, Patrick, was I know the price of eggs went up, but I'm not sure that everything else did. I think most people are probably aware that the unavailability of vehicles, and I'm talking about regular passenger vehicles, the unavailability of a new vehicle because of a computer chip has caused the price of used vehicles to soar like astronomically. Well, that same concept has applied to our industry. And so we plan on replacing our trucks every few years. So the problem is when these parts aren't available, you can't get the new truck. And so then when the new truck becomes unavailable, that also causes used tow trucks to skyrocket like a lot. And that's even if you can find one. Sometimes you're forced to buy a truck sight unseen because it's available and you just have to take it. Tow trucks have gone up, every commercial truck has gone up astronomically. And that includes parts because when the computer chips are unavailable to put these cars onto the road, that also means that a lot of our parts are unavailable. And there's so many parts to a tow truck. So for example, the PTO is the hydraulic pump that runs the hydraulics for our bed, for our winches and everything. Well, PTOs are almost completely unavailable right now. So you could have a brand new truck and it's ready to go, but you don't have the PTO for it. So the truck sits for months while you wait on the PTO. Mechanic shops, they have the same issue. They can't find help either. And so if you have to take your truck in to be serviced, then your truck could sit there for weeks or even months until they're able to fix it, partially because of the labor shortage and partially because of the parts shortage. And so the expense of actually owning and maintaining our trucks is probably what's gone up the most out of anything. And a new tow truck, even back in 2016, when this was signed, for a nice flatbed tow truck, you could buy one for about $95,000. Now that same truck is $135,000 to $145,000. It's a lot of our increases have actually gone up by more than 25%. And when I was putting together, I started out with an Excel sheet of what all our old prices were and trying to decide like, what's a reasonable thing to ask for here? Because a 25% jump, like you said, 25% doesn't sound that scary, but when you look at the actual dollar amount, it does look scary. It looks like a huge price increase. And so then I started really thinking about ways to make it fair for not only for us, but also for the citizens of Douglas County, for the insurance companies, for everybody. And so then I decided to look up like, well, what is the CPI? And I saw that it was 25%. Well, when I applied those numbers, I thought, that really probably is a reasonable number, because when you're paying $95,000 for a new truck and now it's 135 to 145 for the exact same truck. And that's if you can get a truck. That's taken over a year now when you order a new truck to actually receive that new truck. So we're running older trucks for even longer than we did previously because we can't get the new trucks. Well, older trucks cost a lot more, per mile to operate because they have more failures. They're more expensive. And when they do break down and you take it somewhere to get fixed, that takes longer. That's more expensive. Guys are also running more trucks in their fleet than they used to. We have a lot of spare trucks that we wouldn't have had, this time several years ago, because if something goes down, we have to be able to continue to operate. So we have these extra trucks. Well, these extra trucks not only cost more per mile, but the insurance payments and everything has gone up. So I totally understand. And I think it's a really valid thing to think about, is like, how much is this going up as a dollar amount? And it does sound like a lot, but our expenses, they really truly have gone up by that much. I think back in 2019, it seems like everybody's always asking for a price increase. Everybody wants a price increase all the time. And if we'd been asking for this back in 2019, I definitely think that it would have been a luxury to receive a price increase. But now here we are 7 years later, after 2016. And I don't think that it's necessarily a luxury anymore. I think that it's a necessity in order for us to continue to provide the same level of service that we've been providing. It truly is a necessity.
Ryan, how many times do you get a call from dispatch and you have to turn it down because you don't have a working truck or you don't have staff to respond?
We don't turn down dispatch. We'll pull trucks from, we'll pull trucks away from other jobs. Sometimes it'll happen that we'll even send out a truck that's way more expensive than the truck that needs to be there, but we send a truck out on scene just to make sure that we're taking care of Douglas County, of Lawrence Police Department, the Highway Patrol, all of them. I own half the company, and Jason, my partner over here, he owns the other half. And we're out at 3 o'clock in the morning all the time with our guys, even though that's not necessarily what we do on a regular basis. But we always keep at least one of the two of us available to respond to these accidents, so that when the police department or a member of the public needs a tow truck, that we can get right out there right away.
And commissioners, I would say that there's been times in the past when I've heard from dispatch that a provider's on the list, but they don't pick up and they don't think they should be on there anymore. And that's prompted me to reach out to them, but that hasn't happened in at least a couple of years now. So I think they all take it pretty seriously.
I don't have a direct question, but I think you've made a very good point. So I was just going to push it back to commissioners and talk about, I think in my mind, we've got two options that I'm comfortable with. And one would be to adopt the 25% increases. And the other option would be to defer and make kind of a plan for how we evaluate this year after year, that we have something to tie to, so that we're not kind of picking numbers out of the air. It's possible that 25% increase now might not necessitate much of an increase in the next year, but I would like for us to do more of that homework. We could either do it by deferring and coming back with it at this time, or I'm after hearing more explanation, I'm reasonably comfortable with the 25% increase, if that is something other commissioners are looking at.
I think I'm comfortable with the 25% increase here. I recognize it's big. I think maybe I appreciate what Ryan said about, in 2019, that would have been a lot. And probably maybe in 2019, we should have increased it. And We're being nice, right? And I'm sort of weighing that against the fact that none of our providers are stepping away because it must be somewhat fiscally make sense, and trying to balance that of, does it fiscally make sense, or are they trying to do a service to Douglas County? That's sort of what I'm trying to balance here, because I can expect that if, you know, we have some community members who are charged this much, we may hear more about it, because it's a significant increase, but I also don't know how many times they're dealing with being towed on a regular basis and compare it to what I got towed last year for. So, I mean, I'm just trying to balance those things, and I guess I'm fine with that 25% increase, thinking about, I mean, I really do believe that probably in a large number of these cases, you don't get paid. And that it's sort of like our emergency services, you know, for medical services, that sometimes it's a costly cost because sometimes we can't get reimbursed for that or bill for that. And that's just something I'm thinking about.
Well, I'm happy to hear other commissioners are feeling comfortable with that 25%. So I think I move to approve the 2023 tow service agreement and maximum charges, and would suggest that in addition to that, we can direct staff to sort of come back to us with some thoughts about how to assess this in the future, sort of year after year, to have some fair and regular eyes on it. But I feel like it's important to go ahead and move forward with approving that this evening if other commissioners agree. So there's my motion.
That was a fairly long motion, and I think I followed you. Did it include the 25% increases
Yes.
as proposed also in the staff report?
Yes.
In which case I would second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
so
you.
much information. Appreciate your time.
Okay, our next agenda item is an executive session.
Actually, commissioners, before
Oh,
we go
wait,
into
nope, I
that,
screwed up. Boy, I am not on my game tonight. I apologize. Commissioners, I'd like to move to add something to the agenda. Jill Joliker wanted to give us a bit of an update on our E3 Nation tour that we had on equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. There's your E3, equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so we thought we'd take a little bit of time before our executive session, if that's okay with commissioners. Yes. Thank you. Jill?
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Yes, was really pleased with the outcome of the 2-day event that has been in the planning stages for several months. The engagement with Forward Cities came out of, was primarily funded by American Rescue Plan Act funds that were awarded by Douglas County to help us better understand what sort of investments are needed in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to make sure that it's equitable. What would equity look like if we wanted to do a better job of supporting our entrepreneurs of color? And the engagement with Forward Cities was came about after a couple years of talking to them and seeing that their partnerships with other communities doing this work, and some historic alignment that they'd had with area organizations that we partner with, Network Kansas, the Kauffman Foundation, to name a couple. The 2-day event went incredibly well. A lot of gratitude to commissioners and county administrator and county staff for attending and participating in all the sessions. The culmination of the 2-day event, a lot of information to key individuals depending on roles and responsibilities. Everyone from policy leaders like yourselves to lenders to staff in entrepreneur support organizations, ESOs, and community members, providing their perspectives, but also getting some information about what's happening in other communities and how to think differently about this work. The culmination of the 2-day event was a strategic doing this past Friday afternoon, where we made some real formal commitments around some goals and opportunities and assets that we have available to us collectively in the community. A summary of those goals will be presented very soon. It'll be distributed out to all the stakeholders that participated. And then we're going to get organized about how we can operationalize that. Some of that, how do we operationalize some of that from a leadership perspective, even in this organization? So that'll be some conversations with county administration, but also with our leadership about what that looks like. And then also just the results of the scorecard session. So the scorecard was one of the primary deliverables that we initially identified with Forward Cities. It was a tool to estimate what do we have, what do we not have, what do we want to have to truly have an equitable ecosystem. So the results of that scorecard session will be made available in a summary document that we'll make available to you all, and we can have a dialogue about the results of that with some of our stakeholders. And then we move from here through the next little less than 6 months. We work in a ongoing technical assistance partnership with Forward Cities. They'll be providing us support, doing check-ins with us on a 30-day basis to see where we're at, providing assistance along the way. And also as they work through the rest of the sites on that tour, I think Sacramento is next, will be a part of a larger cohort of communities that have gone through this process the way we have, and have perhaps access to a learning community about how to operationalize and support one another as cohorts in different parts of the country. I was incredibly pleased with the outcome of it. And again, just thank commissioners for all their participation and leadership.
Thanks, Jill. I know commissioners, we all were in attendance at different pieces and parts of all of that. Any comments on that?
I always think it's gratifying to have so many stakeholders in the room and talk about what entrepreneurs need and how do we support them and how do we identify them and help them identify themselves. Because a lot of people are, starting something and I just sell at the craft fairs. I'm not an entrepreneur. Like bringing people in from all levels and assessing what they need and then letting them advocate for themselves and bring those resources to them. So I was excited about the event and hope that there'll be, multiple chances to circle back with our local stakeholders that were there about how did they respond to the event, what were their thoughts on next steps, and keep those conversations going. So thank you for putting it together, Jill.
Yeah, I'll just, I was lucky to get to participate in almost all of them, except for the scorecard event, which is really fulfilling for me to get to hear sort of the progression of those conversations and different folks attending different parts of the event. And just heard a lot of positive feedback about you in particular, Jill. So just want to highlight that you put a lot of intentional work into organizing this and inviting folks with purpose to participate. So really want to appreciate that and how much labor that was, and excited about what's to come. And then also just give a shout out to one of our particular partners who I noticed had a real strong showing, the Small Business Development Center, really committed those 2 whole days and their whole team to participate in a really meaningful way. And I thought they contributed a lot to the conversation. So just wanted to highlight them for that. Thanks for your work on this, Jill.
Yeah, I attended 3 of the sessions and yeah, I echo all of Jill's praises for her work on this. And I will share that a couple of times I was frustrated with the amount of talking at us that was happening. And yet I have found since then, I have shared quite a bit of what I learned from that talking at. So maybe I was being a little bit too, need to reflect on that a little bit because I learned quite a bit. And I especially appreciated the 3rd session that we had at the Innovation Center and some talk around the systems that are getting in the way that are historical and are racist that have really made it hard for minority entrepreneurs to establish themselves in some of these spaces, and the work that that needs to be done to overcome that. That was very eye-opening to me. I hadn't thought about it that way, and I appreciated that. You pointed out the Small Business Development Center. I think Chamber also had a large presence at each event, and really appreciate their work in this. I think often we think about economic development gains as being, you know, a new company like Panasonic per se coming into the region, and that is not always a sustainable model. This is a much more sustainable model in it. And when we talk about expanding our perspective around economic development, this is one of the things that we're talking about. I just want to make sure that we're also thinking about things like childcare, transportation, you know, affordable housing and all those things, because that is impacting our economic development as well. So it's great to, you know, build these entrepreneurs, but if we don't have appropriate childcare in Douglas County so that they can open their business, or if we're not helping that entrepreneur who wants to open childcare, we're just creating more barriers. So great conversation. Really appreciate all your work on this, Jill, and your whole team. I know there was a whole team that worked on it, and so thank you for that.
Add just a little bit. I really appreciate it. I didn't mind the talking at, because I think some of these conversations, especially around equity, need to be jump started. Like, I've had conversations on small levels and felt like it's hard to get traction on equity discussions around entrepreneurship in particular. And so I think a little jump start was all right. And that's why I'm curious to kind of circle back with the partners that were there about what things, you know, made you uncomfortable to the point of wanting to see change. I really loved that they elevated the concept of entrepreneurship as a human right, as, you know, the ability to self-determine how you start a business, how you get paid, that it doesn't just have to be working for someone else, that there are other creative ways to create income, which I've been an entrepreneur my whole adult life. So I definitely feel for that. But I really think that that is a lens that I like and will continue with, that we have a lot of structural barriers in addition to those around, race and education and income, ability, disability. In addition to that, we have like structural things like that we don't have access to universal health care and childcare, and there are things that make it really hard to start a business and create income for yourself and for your family. So I think it's the beginning of a lot of discussions that I'm excited to have.
Well, we made this an agenda item, so let's open it up for public comment. Thank you, commissioners. I remembered this time. Is there anyone here for public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. Any final comments, commissioners? Okay.
Commissioners, I
wait.
did want to share that you'll be getting a save the date soon for a lenders luncheon that the e-community partners are going to be hosting. Food Policy Council is helping us organize that and kind of continuing these conversations in different ways. So look for that save the date. You should be getting it anytime.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item 3.2. And I'll make a motion to recess into executive session to consult with county counsel regarding the treatment and recovery center. The justification is to consult with the attorney or the public body on the matters which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship. Also attending will be County Administrator Sarah Plinsky, Director of Behavioral Health Projects Bob Trayansky, and outside counsel Brooke Agier. We will return to open session in this room so we'll return back here at, why don't we just say 7 o'clock? And we assume that there will be no action to follow, but we will talk about it when we get back. That's my motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're going to extend our executive session for 15 more minutes. We'll return back at 7:15. Commissioner Kelly, we're extending our executive session for 15 more minutes. We'll be back at 7:30. We are back from our executive session and we do not have any action at this time from that executive session. We'll move on to appointments. Commissioners, do we have any appointments this evening? I don't think we do. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to Commissioner Administrator Miscellaneous. Sarah, your weekly memo.
Commissioners, my memo is in the packet. I want to cover some calendar items first, and then I'll go back and kind of give you an update on the TRC. Just there's, so next week, we have a work session on private roads that I'm really looking forward to. This is kind of dorky planning stuff I really like. And then we're planning for a March 8th kind of pre-budget review and talks about our community partner agreements and our service agreements. And then again, commissioners, we won't be meeting on the 15th. I included in the packet per the commission's direction, I prepared an outline of the work that we have done over the last week regarding the treatment and recovery center. Do you want me to read it to you, commissioners, so we can add it to the record?
Yes, please.
Okay. On Friday, February 17th, county staff and council consisting of John Bullock, Brooke Aziri, Bob Triansky, and myself met with Burt Nash staff and council consisting of Patrick Schmidt, Stephen O'Neill, Carrie Combs, and Noreen Vergara to discuss the terms of the operating agreement for 90 minutes. KDAD's Commissioner Andy Browns attended those discussions as well. Earlier that day, Patrick Schmitz and I had a one-on-one check-in. Patrick and I prepared our teams for that upcoming discussion. On Tuesday, the 21st, county staff and council team outlined above met again with Burt Nash staff and council team as outlined above to continue our work on the terms of the operating agreement for another 90 minutes. KDAD's Commissioner Andy Brown was in attendance for part of that discussion that day. Earlier today, Brooke Azira, Bob Triansky, and myself met with Burt Nash staff and TRC staff, including Stephen O'Neill, Carrie Combs, Jen Prestons, Bree Harmon Moore, Jesse Belt, and Tricia Dillingham to review the proposed 2023 TRC operating budget and staffing plan for 2 hours. Bob Triansky and I attended the interview of a potential medical director for the TRC earlier today. Tomorrow, Thursday, February 23rd, there's an additional meeting scheduled for the morning to follow up on the terms for that agreement with county staff and council consisting of John Bullock, Brooke Aziro, myself, and Burt Nash staff and council consisting of Stephen O'Neill, Carrie Combs, and Noreen Vergara, to the best of my knowledge. There are additional meetings calendared for next Monday, next Wednesday, and potentially Friday the 3rd.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate all your work on that. I know that is a lot of meetings in a short amount of time.
And that's all I have, commissioners, on my memo.
Commissioners, anything miscellaneous or upcoming calendar items we need to discuss?
I have a couple of calendar items, and I'm guessing I'd be the only one, but it's worth putting out there. Both tomorrow, there's a tour with a Plasticon, and it's part of the chamber, and I was planning to go to that. And tomorrow midday, there's a land use session at the Public Works Department, and it's actually billed towards, I think, developers and such. And I wanted to go be a fly on the wall and kind of hear how those conversations go and what issues get flagged. It's planning to be at both of those. What, nobody else?
I was going to go to the Plasticon tour, but I had to cancel today. So.
Okay.
Yes.
And I was interested in that lunch at Public Works, but conflicts with my schedule. So I'll be eager to hear what fly on the wall Commissioner really heard.
I also, as part of a miscellaneous, I've now been to wind turbine installations in 3 different counties around the state, and have a couple of others that I will likely get to, trying to hear from kind of the broadest range of stakeholders that I can get a hold of. So my first tour was in Bourbon County, and that was with county staff. It was the county councilor from Bourbon County and their road and bridge director, and talking through what their agreements were and what worked well and what was stressful, how they interact with the public, some of those things. Bourbon County is not zoned, so they do not have some of the same tools that we have. Another is in Allen County, and that was kind of a self tour. I'm actually working on something a bit more formal, and possibly bring a couple of planning commissioners. Perhaps we'll see what might happen, or if county staff is interested, if I can get something set up. But just being under the towers and next to the towers, and what can you hear? What do you see? Those kinds of things. And then most recently, which would be Monday, I went to Reading, which is in Lyons County, and I met with a landowner there who had some concerns after having lived with them for 3 years. And she's also fellow rural firefighter. So she had, we had kind of a lot of things in common to talk about, and went up and visited some of the towers and actually spoke quite at length with one of the workers who came to see what we were doing there, because I'm not sure we had full permission. So just got a lot of questions answered. I would say that the take home so far, and I'm still kind of in that learning sphere, is that there's quite a variety of outcomes depending on how the county advocates for itself, both funding wise and road outcomes. The roads in Bourbon County that the wind installation paid for were fabulous, not so much in Lyons County, including that they had some difficulty getting the company to finish doing erosion control kinds of work. So that was actually being done now somewhat after the fact, I think as a result of a lawsuit possibly, or at least some other kind of pressure. So I think I'm learning a lot, and learning that there are some pretty big variabilities in what outcomes can be. And I'm glad that Douglas County has some pretty professional staff and are on top of a lot of things like that. And I think we would be ahead of discussions as opposed to just being behind those, especially with these extra eyes on things. So I'm continuing that process. Thought I'd let you know.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending all that time, Commissioner. Really, I appreciate that. My only quick note is to say that I really enjoyed getting to attend the Employee Service Awards yesterday. And so one, it was a really delicious barbecue lunch, which I'm always grateful for. And it was just, the big takeaway for me was as more and more people started pouring into Building 21 and filling up all the tables, that there was just lots of folks that were happy to see each other and get the opportunity to catch up and connect, and lots of literal family connections and relationships amongst, kind of across our departments. That was just cool to witness and see some folks that I didn't even know worked for the county, but that I know in other spaces in the community. So it was just cool to watch that gathering and see people recognized and supported by their coworkers, because we didn't just see the folks that were listed in the program with their sort of milestone markers or anniversaries, but also lots of their coworkers coming to support, which was cool.
All right. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.